Imagine going to, a fun get-together with friends, and then it ends. Ends in this shocking tragedy that just sparks years and years of public debate. What happens when the official story, the explanations, just clash with really persistent questions? Especially when, well, key details just don't seem to add up. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is always to cut through all that information noise, giving you the important stuff, the nuggets of knowledge and insight, quickly but thoroughly. Today we're diving deep into the really perplexing case of Tamla Horsford. Now, this is a story that's started as a reported accident, but it quickly blew up into this national conversation, fueled by social media, calls for clarity, calls for justice. So for this deep dive, our main source is a pretty comprehensive review on Wikipedia, the entry, Death of Tamla Horsford.
Yeah, and it does a good job pulling together the details from, various reports, the different investigations. It's all laid out there.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack the multiple layers of this case for you. We'll look at the initial events, the official findings, but also the family's concerns, which were pretty significant, and the huge public outcry, the reinvestigations that followed. Our goal really is to help you navigate these different perspectives, understand why this case still resonates so deeply.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's a story with, so many twists and turns. You really have to pay attention to every single detail.
Well, what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how the narrative evolved. It starts as this local incident, and then it just blossoms into this widely discussed event, highlighting these much broader societal questions. This case is a powerful example of how, especially now with social media, a single contested truth can just morph, become a national conversation. It really challenges the idea of official closure.
That's a really sharp observation. So it's not just about the facts, what happened. It's about how the public sees those facts, or maybe the lack of facts, and how that perception becomes its own force.
Okay, so let's set the scene for you. Picture this. November 3rd, 2018. We're in Cumming, Georgia. Tamla Horsford, she was a 40-year-old mother of 5. She goes to this football mom slumber party at someone's house.
Right, and the sources paint a picture of a pretty standard gathering. People were drinking, watching football, they played Cards Against Humanity. An important detail, though, for context. It was a football mom's party, but there were also 3 men at the house that night.
Okay.
So the atmosphere described, it sounds pretty relaxed, common social event, which honestly just makes what happened next even more unsettling.
It really does, because things took such a tragic turn. According to witnesses, Tamla got up around 2 a.m., said she was going to smoke a cigarette on the back porch. Then, fast forward, morning of November 4th, 7:30 a.m., the homeowner's aunt finds Tamla lying face down, motionless, under the porch.
Right.
But the official 911 call, that doesn't come in until 8:59 a.m. It was made by Jose Barrera, who was the homeowner's boyfriend.
And that gap, between the discovery at 7:30 and the call near 9:0, that's one of those initial details that just, it makes you pause, raises questions right away, hints at the complexity to come.
It absolutely does. And the 911 call itself is incredibly revealing. Barrera describes her face down, not breathing, and he specifically points out this small cut on her wrist, even suggests it might be self-inflicted. But then, and this is critical, you can hear a woman's voice on the recording, speculating, saying maybe Horsford was pushed from the balcony.
Wow.
Police get there just minutes after that call, 9:07 a.m. So right from the start, like literally on the 911 call, you got these immediate conflicting ideas being thrown out there.
Yeah.
Suicide, pushed. It just sets the stage perfectly for all the confusion and debate that followed. It wasn't a simple discovery. The seeds of doubt, these alternative theories, they were planted almost instantly. From an investigative angle, how does that kind of immediate contradiction, suicide versus possible homicide, affect how you even approach the scene?
That's a crucial point, yeah. When those first accounts are so different, so sharp in their contrast, it immediately bumps up the complexity for the first responders, hugely. It means investigators aren't just looking for evidence to back up one idea. They have to actively work to preserve everything, gather info that could support or rule out completely different scenarios. That tension, even just whispered on a 911 call, definitely adds this layer of scrutiny from minute one.
Okay, so given that confusing start, what did the first official investigation actually conclude, especially with those competing theories floating around right away?
Well, the initial autopsy, the one ordered by the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, it found multiple blunt force injuries. That was the term used. Toxicology also came back significant. A high blood alcohol level, 0.238.
Wow, that is high.
It is. And traces of THC and also alprazolam, which you might know as Xanax, an anti-anxiety medication. So based on all that, the official conclusion was accidental death. The thinking was the high BAC caused her to fall about 14 feet from the balcony.
14 feet.
And the injuries, just a result of that fall.
So, okay, multiple blunt force injuries. But the official line is she just fell because she was intoxicated. But her family, her friends, they weren't buying that, were they? I mean, later reports mention a heart laceration. That seems hard to square with just a fall.
They were definitely not convinced. No. Horsford's family, her friends, they voiced, significant skepticism, just weren't satisfied with that accidental ruling at all. And that led them to push for a second independent examination, which was eventually done by the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Okay.
And you're right to flag the injuries. The details from that second autopsy, they were quite extensive.
So what did that GBI autopsy find? Did it give more clarity on those injuries, especially that heart injury you mentioned?
It provided a lot more detail, yes.
Yeah.
The GBI medical examiner noted severe injuries, head, neck, torso. They also found cuts on her face, wrist, hand, lower legs. And crucially, yes, the GBI report specifically mentioned a laceration to the right ventricle of her heart.
A laceration to the heart.
Correct. The GBI tox screen also confirmed the 0.238, BAC, the THC, the alprazolam. But here's the thing. Despite these very detailed findings, including that really significant heart injury, this autopsy also concluded the death was accidental.
Still accidentally.
Still accidental. Again, attributing the fall primarily to intoxication.
Wow. Okay, so even with something as major as a lacerated heart, both official reports land on accidental fall due to drinking.
Oh.
How do investigators bridge that gap between such severe trauma and an accidental ruling? It seems like a huge leap for people to accept.
That really is the core dilemma here, isn't it? The official narrative stuck to the idea that the fall linked to the intoxication was enough. They maintained that the extensive injuries, yes, even the cardiac laceration, were consistent with falling from that height onto a hard surface. The difficulty is squaring that medical possibility with, the public's gut feeling, the natural assumption that an injury that severe might point to something more forceful, maybe intentional. The case was officially closed by the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. February 20th, 2019, Major Joe Perkins from the Sheriff's Office, he stated, no evidence of foul play, said none of Horsford's injuries aligned with foul play. His quote was pretty stark. It was a party. They were drinking. She was drinking. Most of the partygoers had gone to bed. She was on the deck alone.
Alone. That was their conclusion.
Yes. And he confirmed they'd interviewed 30 people, family, friends, partygoers. So you see how that initial interpretation of the evidence, it just sets this really strong precedent.
Yeah.
And once law enforcement establishes that narrative, it becomes incredibly hard to shift it. Doesn't matter if there are additional details from a second autopsy or concerns raised by the family, that official story takes hold.
And yet, in this case, that precedent was seriously challenged. What was the thing that finally broke through? What made this closed case suddenly capture everyone's attention? Because usually, like you said, that official narrative is pretty tough to shake.
Well, the first real spark of public outcry came about 2 months after her death, and it actually centered on Jose Barrera.
The boyfriend who called 911.
Exactly. He was a county court officer at the time. And he got fired. Why? For internally accessing the incident report on this case multiple times.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That action, it was perceived by a lot of people online as suspicious, like an attempt to interfere, maybe conceal something. And that just lit the fuse online. Hundreds of people started sharing the hashtag Tamla Horsford, questioning everything, calling for justice.
And then things really exploded in the summer of 2020, right? Her case got pushed back into the national spotlight in a huge way.
It really did. You had the nationwide protests happening against racism and police brutality, George Floyd's murder, and that whole context, that broader social movement, it just reignited public interest in Tamla Horsford's case. Massively. It provided this powerful lens. Many people, especially in communities of color, started looking again at cases like hers, where questions lingered about official investigations involving Black individuals. It suddenly became part of this much larger conversation about justice, about accountability.
Right. So you saw this huge surge in advocacy. Her name was on protest signs right there in Cumming, Georgia.
Yeah.
A Change.org petition demanding the case be reopened got, what was it, over 700,000 signatures?
709,000, yeah.
It was huge. Even rappers, T.I., 50 Cent, they were sharing posts demanding a second look. And the source specifically mentions this, too, that the relationship between Horsford's race and her death has been a subject of controversy and debate. It says, a race-based dimension has been implied by family and media. Now, the official investigations found no racial motivation, but that didn't stop people arguing that race played a role in the events, in the investigation itself. Again, the source points this out, this undeniable element of race is a big point of debate. Officially, no racial motivation found. But what specific things, what context would lead a family or the media to imply race was a factor here, even if the official report doesn't find explicit evidence of it?
That's a really critical and frankly complex question. You have to look at history. Communities of color, especially Black communities in America, have faced systemic issues, deep distrust sometimes with law enforcement, with the justice system. It's a documented reality.
Right.
So when official explanations maybe don't quite line up with a family's gut feeling, or when details seem ambiguous, hazy, it can feed into a perception that maybe the investigation wasn't as thorough, wasn't as fair as it could have been. And in that context, race can become this underlying lens through which events are viewed and questioned. It's about how the investigation feels to those affected. Do they feel heard? Do their concerns feel genuinely addressed?
And right in the middle of all this renewed attention, the family's attorney just dropped a bombshell, directly challenging that official narrative.
Absolutely. Huge moment. June 5th, 2020. Ralphie Fernandez, he's the Horsford family attorney, writes this incredibly powerful letter, sends it to Tamla's husband, Leander. And in that letter, Fernandez flat out claims his team's investigation strongly suggested homicide.
Homicide, I mean, that's a direct contradiction, a massive one. What specific claims did he make in the letters to back that up, to suggest it wasn't an accident?
Fernandez laid out several really critical points that definitely fueled the public's skepticism. He said, and this is a quote, "Witness statements are in conflict."
Okay.
A potential subject handled the body as well as the evidence prior to law enforcement arriving. That's a huge allegation.
Yeah.
He continued, "Evidence was disposed of and no inquiry followed. The scene was not preserved." He also talked about the injuries, said Horsford's injuries were consistent with a physical struggle.
Consistent with a struggle.
But he added a very important caveat. He said the lack of photos from the initial autopsy meant his team couldn't reach a definite conclusion on that specific point.
Okay, so this is where things really intensify, right? This private tragedy becomes this potent symbol in a much bigger public conversation, especially when you get new info like that attorney's letter coinciding with these larger social movements. It really shows how a local case, even with a clear official ruling, can just transform, become something much bigger, fueled by public doubt and a strong counter-narrative.
Precisely. It's that convergence, new information, like the attorney's letter, meeting these broader societal currents. It creates this powerful momentum, often pushes for a reevaluation, even when the official channels have already, made their call. It really underscores this idea that, look, in the court of public opinion, a case isn't truly closed if those big questions are still hanging out there.
And all that pressure, the petitions, the attorney, the public outcry, it eventually forced another official look, didn't it?
It did, yeah. The pressure became immense. Forsyth County Sheriff Ron Freeman, on June 12, 2020, he sent a formal letter officially requesting that the GBI reopen the case, reinvestigate it.
GBI again?
Yes. And Sheriff Freeman specifically said it was best handled by an independent agency, basically acknowledging the public's demand for an impartial review. The GBI agreed just a few days later, June 18, 2020, case reopened.
Okay, so here we go again. After everything, the public pushing, the signatures, the celebrities, the attorney claiming possible homicide, what was the final outcome? This second official reinvestigation by the GBI, did it finally give everyone the answers they were looking for?
Well, the GBI wrapped up its reinvestigation on July 28, 2021, and ultimately, they decided not to pursue criminal charges.
No charges?
No charges. Their final ruling essentially reaffirmed the original findings. They called it a tragic accident. Stated again, they found no evidence of foul play. And this, it really brings up an important question, doesn't it? What does it actually mean for a case to be closed, especially in the public's mind? When you still have these significant, unanswered questions raised by a family's attorney, echoed by huge public advocacy, they just remain unaddressed by that final report. So despite the GBI saying, again, accident, those details from the attorney, the conflicting statements, the scene handling for many people, those inconsistencies continue to challenge the official story. The reinvestigation brought official finality, maybe, but certainly not public consensus.
And that lands us right back at the core of this whole lingering debate around Tamla Horsford's death, officially, accidental death, fall, intoxication. But for so many people, including her family, that suspicion of homicide just persists, based on those inconsistencies we talked about, the alleged mishandling of the scene.
Right.
And then there's that undeniable element of race. The source is clear. It's been a subject of controversy and debate, a race-based dimension, implied by family and media. And again, while the official investigation concluded no racial motivation, that argument continues for some that her race played a role, either in the events themselves or in how the investigation unfolded, how evidence was seen, how seriously alternatives were maybe considered. So, what does this all mean for you listening to this? We've walked through 2 official investigations. We've heard compelling details from a 911 call. We've seen an attorney's powerful letter suggesting homicide, and this massive public engagement that literally forced a re-examination. And yet that core conflict is still there, accidental death versus suspicions of foul play. It's just such a powerful example of how hard it can be to square conflicting information, conflicting perspectives, even when official bodies have made their ruling.
It truly does highlight that complex dance between, legal processes, public perception, and that deep human need for definitive answers, especially when key information, or how you interpret it, is so heavily contested. This case really exemplifies that enduring challenge, achieving both legal closure and social closure when doubt just won't go away.
Yeah. This deep dive really shows us how, even with multiple official rulings, that human element doubt, the desire for clarity, it can keep a story alive, keep people asking questions, especially when the details just don't seem to fit together neatly. So think about this. What stands out to you about how this case unfolded? How do you see the actions of individuals, the incredible power of social media, and the backdrop of these broader social movements all intersecting? How does it shape our understanding of justice in a world just flooded with information and often really conflicting narratives? Something to keep mulling over long after this deep dive ends.